More flexible and less fiddly than ever before.
Yeah.
The other side of those dual blades, however, is that Wilds is light on any real challenge, even for what I'd expect at launch. Never ask.
That's the best we can do.
More flexible and less fiddly than ever before. The other side of those dual blades, however, is that Wilds is light on any real challenge, even for what I'd expect at launch, never asking me to think hard about my equipment. But while the monsters may not pose much of a threat this time around, smart tweaks to combat still mean the act of carving them up has rarely felt better.
What does he mean? I mean, yeah, you have to think about your equipment. I mean, you don't necessarily have to if you go in with like 4 people, but if you're by yourself, for sure.
Him killing Arkveld on the beta. Did he do it? Did he stream himself killing Arkveld on the beta? He didn't do that, did he?
Yeah, I don't know what he's talking about there.
There isn't one. Okay, I didn't think so.
My first surprise in Wilds was that the campaign isn't just a totally forgettable excuse to kill anything that crosses your path this time. Okay, it's still mostly that as you explore yet another uncharted land to solve some mystery.
There's never any good excuse to kill anything.
Fresh, the difference here is that the characters within it are actually pretty great.
Well, yeah, the girl is hot. That's what's mad. That's what matters.
The excitable engineer Gemma.
I disagree there.
So gonna talk later, pal.
I'll say one thing about the game after doing the like I've got a fair amount of hours in it now. Didn't care about the characters that much. I'm gonna be honest. Not one character like actually grabbed my attention. I'm gonna be honest. I think probably the most memorable character was the Woodwood guy that was dressed like a wizard. That was probably, at least so far, the most memorable character for me personally. Like all the main characters, I know everybody likes Gemma. I don't tell LTA. I'm talking about his woman now. But Gemma, the girls, I can't remember her name. The girl's name starts with an A. Any of them, really. I mean, even the main guy that sends you on the mission, the only reason I remember him is because his voice is in animes. Like, that's the only reason I remember him. So, I'm not saying that they're terrible characters, but they're just not very memorable. That's my opinion on it anyway.
Empathetic handler Alma.
Yeah.
Or the
I disagree with the
of a
reviewer.
biologist Eric.
This forest is amazing.
Your team is full of likable personalities and little character arcs throughout the gorgeously animated cutscenes.
See? Told you they'd be fun.
That kid I definitely didn't like.
That was enough to get me more invested. The revamped structure of Wilds also means that campaign is significantly shorter than I was expecting. I reached the credits in just 15 hours and didn't have to fight a single monster twice in that time, getting enough materials from any initial encounters to keep my gear up to snuff and jump right from one mission to the next.
Okay.
When you compare that to the 40+ hours it took to see the end of the story and world, it feels like the intent is to allow more people to quote-unquote beat Wilds. And
All right, before he says anything, I don't totally disagree. I don't disagree with that assessment. You can definitely beat Wilds in about half the time. I get what he's saying. We're like, well, here's the one thing though. I do have a skewed perspective because the crew, you guys, were nice enough to help me get through the campaign. So I had a lot of co-op help on most of the bosses throughout the entire campaign. So I am coming at it from that perspective. I do feel like if I played solo, it would have been more difficult. I would have had to prepare better, and it would have taken more time, for sure. But even then, I played co-op on World as well. And I do feel like World definitely took longer. And it did feel like the preparation was slightly more important than Worlds, I guess. But it's been so long since I played, man, it's honestly kind of hard to remember. But I do remember World always like prepping, no matter what weapon I was using. Like looking at, you know. But to be fair, when you run through a campaign for the first time in Wilds, if you beat the bosses the first time, it's kind of hard to prep for them because you have no idea what you're going to be fighting. You don't know what weaknesses to prep for, what kind of armor to wear to be at your maximum like efficiency as far as defense. You just don't know. And like I said, most Monster Hunter games at the beginning of the mission, they kind of give you key items. You know what I mean? Like if the monster's going to do poison, they're going to give you some antidotes when you go in. So, but I do get to it in a sense what he's saying. But I think it's really, honestly, more comparable to Worlds than it is necessarily different. But if you were being really, really critical, you might, yeah, I could see why he's saying that about Wilds.
I just want to see, when did I beat the game? Like, is there a playlist for this?
Because it definitely didn't take us no 40 hours.
I beat the game. So if I add in all the time that I played the game, 5 hours plus 4, plus 4 again, plus 4, plus 3, plus 2. I mean, yeah, I guess it was like 25-hour campaign. Yeah,
about 20
I would
hours.
say it took a little bit longer, but like including stream stuff, I don't think that's necessarily too much different. Yeah, I don't know, guys. That's not counting all the grinding you did? Yeah, sure. Let me go back. I fucking lost it. Where'd it go? There it is.
I certainly appreciate how that shift toward approachability might appeal to anyone who has been traditionally intimidated by the series.
Yeah, sure.
But as a veteran, I can't help but be a little disappointed that I literally didn't get knocked out once in that entire time. There's never a skill or armor testing wall of a monster that forced me to really consider my equipment choices more deeply in order to earn the reward of a hard-fought victory.
I mean, it's not wrong. What he's saying is not wrong.
Avoiding spoilers.
But they built the game that way.
I mean, I don't
for a reason.
like. I don't know about this, bro. Like,
it's just like we kept on joking, right, the whole time. Like, oh, you finally beat the tutorial. Whenever I beat the campaign, because it does kind of feel that way. But it's obvious that the game really starts to open up. I mean, the game is really. It feels like it's pushing you into the end game. That's where it really wants you to be, right? So I'm not disagreeing with the guy. But it may just come down to a different, design, like the way they wanted to go with it, right? That's just their design, how they wanted this game to be built, and it just is what it is. That's what they decided to do.
like, you did the demo on an overtuned monster for hardcore players. They got the previous version of the full game, which is probably an easy version for the reviewers. Yeah, maybe that's it.
There is, of course, more to do once you get past the credits. That's where the larger changes Wilds makes to the traditional Monster Hunter loop really start to shine.
Okay, let's see it.
Gone are the days of returning to a separate town between every hunt, then going down the same checklist of tasks before you're ready for the next one. Pretty much everything you need is out in the field with you, and you're never more than a lickety-split loading screen away from whichever beautiful area you want to be in.
That's nice.
Convenient adjustments are all over the place, like food buffs being tied to a timer now that sticks around between hunts.
After you
It doesn't even tick down while in camp, making a previously repetitive process substantially smoother without removing the depth it added to hunts.
That's true. That's true. That's an improvement for sure.
You don't have to worry about
The
eating as
roaringly
much.
successful result of those changes is that a vast majority of the friction past games could produce as you start and stop and restart between every encounter has been removed. Now you can just check your map for monster information and go hunt. The monsters you'll face are also...
I think that's a good and a bad thing. Like, for example, I think it's really good that you have, like, auto-crafting, and this is in Monster Hunter World. Like, if you have potions and you loot honey, it will auto-craft them into max potions or mega potions, whatever they are. And, like, you have other things that are, like, kind of... Like, because I think
I'm not even going to lie. I did not know it did that. Is that something you have to turn on, or does it just automatically do that? I have not even noticed. Because I've had to craft my potions. Maybe. I guess that's something you have to turn on.
Monster Hunter Wilds is going to be that game where... Because I'm comparing this, like, a lot of this criticism is actually very similar to the criticism that people had for Elden Ring. Is that with Elden Ring, a lot of people said that a lot of the base game was actually very easy, and it wasn't challenging to them hardly at all. And so now I'm thinking about this from that context, and I'm like, well, I don't necessarily know. That doesn't necessarily make the game bad. Customization Wild, Elden Ring was hard. I mean, I don't know. I didn't really think so that much, but like that's also as somebody that I played all the other ones.
generally excellent. That could be a flashy newcomer like the flamenco-inspired Lala Barina.
Yeah, this one looks really cool.
Or Wild's headliner Arkveld and its chain-like appendages.
Yeah.
But the true stunner has to be New Udra. The tentacles of Monster Hunter's first octopus-like creature
this
can
is
be as
badass.
unpredictable to contend with as you might expect, especially when they're literally on fire. And the satisfaction of severing every single one of them over the course of a hunt is second to none.
Yeah, no doubt. That's awesome.
The appeal of Monster Hunter's fights has always been how it empowers you with flashy moves and hard-hitting attacks. But knowing when to strike and where to stand and how the monster will behave next is just as important as figuring out which buttons to press.
That's true. He's right.
That's true in Wilds too, but combat is also more flexible and forgiving here. For example, you can adjust your footing a little more mid-combo, resulting in fewer moments where a mistimed attack with a long animation had me embarrassingly slicing at the air.
Which is a huge improvement, by the way. Massive, gigantic fucking improvement. Because Monster Hunter Worlds...
I haven't played melee characters, so I don't really have an opinion on it.
And, like, it's not like that's necessarily a bad thing, but at the same time, yeah, the focus mode and everything else, like, having focus mode and then having a lot of defensive reactive gameplay that they added, like with the parries and the perfect parries, and then also with the, there's one more I'm thinking of, the clashes. Like, that's something that allows people that are fans of action combat games to get into Monster Hunter early while still maintaining the ceiling for the game, because the best players will, of course, be the ones that don't even need to do that in the first place.
Damn you, commercials.
Janet! When's the last time you had a vegetable?
In many ways, the combat feels like it's all about the new wound system this time. Wounds open up once you deal enough damage to a given body part, and then you'll deal extra damage when attacking them. But deal enough damage to a wound and it'll break, resetting that spot. Every weapon also has a simple to execute focus strike that will deal a burst of damage to a wound and break it right away. So maximizing the amount of time you leave one open and then using that finisher before it closes naturally is an interesting subgame to manage.
Sure.
Or at least it would be if Wilds ever presented me with a challenge that pushed me to make those considerations. Whether I was playing online or solo, I've never had a mission reach the 20-minute mark, and I've only fainted 2 times total across dozens of hours. Compare that to World, which had real tests like Kieran, who smacked me silly my first couple of attempts, forcing me to...
Didn't Kieran get added later on in the game? Like, I don't remember, like, I heard that it was added after launch, but I could be wrong about that.
I do remember fighting that thing.
It was in the game baseline? Okay. Yeah, I didn't know.
Pack, what's up?
And craft an armor set around thunder resistance, and it's hard not to feel like Capcom's desire
Yeah,
to make
true,
this...
Pack. Okay, that makes
Is it
sense, Pack.
possible
Yeah.
that maybe this guy just sucked? Because, like, the first time I fought the Kieran, like, I even fought the Arc-Tempered Kieran, I killed it my first try. I don't think so. Like, yeah...
and more
had OP
inviting
gear, though?
Monster Hunter sanded off some of the bumps I actually
You mean
enjoyed.
It seems like really this guy's only
Wow.
complaint is just the difficulty
Things
of the
do
game.
ramp up a little bit in the post game, but even there, I only really had to worry about upgrading
Yeah.
armor or falling behind in damage once or twice during the content that's available at launch. After the 15 hours it took me to beat the campaign, I only had to spend another 15 to finish every side quest that wasn't about catching fish, and just 5 more after that before I had the best armor set and weapon I could get, and a pretty solid suite of skill-boosting decorations. To be fair, I still have plenty more equipment I could grind for, but my usual desire to get the top-tier weapon of each elemental type and put together specialized outfits for certain challenging fights just isn't here this time, because those fights aren't here either. I think a lot of this comes down to raw numbers that could hypothetically be tweaked in one of the many patches that are sure to come, but some of what makes things so easy also seems to be baked into the bones of Wilds. For example, nearly every time you focus strike a wound, the monster gets locked into a little stagger animation, and you'll be breaking wounds a lot. Meanwhile, on the crafting side of things, my
Well, they're probably just going to make it to where the wounds don't activate as often, right?
Yeah, they'll balance that
Like,
out
whenever
eventually.
you go into higher difficulty modes. And also, like, I mean, I don't know, like, I think if you want to make the difficulty of the game, I feel like as somebody who's played Monster Hunter World, like I didn't think that Wilds was like really super hard either. But
yeah, I haven't either.
Arkfeld was hard, but he was like overtuned. But like besides Arkfeld, the game was pretty easy. That's why he said it could be patched. Yeah, exactly, right? And so like I just don't really see this as being a problem. That's wrong. There's hard monsters at the end game in Wilds.
The best armor was way shorter than I ever expected because materials that are usually super rare can sometimes show up as guaranteed rewards when looking at the monster list on your map. That was excitingly convenient initially, but it's also what brought that loot chase to an almost trivially fast end.
Perfection.
I imagine
it is easier to get
will
loot
get a
now
lot
than
more
it used to
people
be.
through the front door. But it also means that where
Or
my
get,
past
you know,
few Monster
get
Hunter
your
reviews wrapped up around the
materials.
50 to 60 hour mark while I still had plenty more I was excited to do, I started losing steam with Wilds before I even hit 40. Don't get me wrong, that's still a healthy chunk of game, and it has absolutely been some of the most fun I've had with the series. I'm also
That's
sure
what
any
matters,
longtime
right?
fans
That
will
you
be
had
thinking,
fun.
well, we just have to wait for updates or G-Rank
exactly.
or
More
whatever
accessible.
for the real
Yeah,
challenge.
Beck.
But in that regard, Capcom's own roadmap has left
It just
me
seems like he's
very-
really just
There's
complaining
only
about the
one
difficulty.
monster
Is what
scheduled
it
to be
is what
added
it
for
sounds like.
all of spring, and then
I think that like developing games and making them really hard is probably one of the biggest mistakes that developers can make.
You actually agree with Asmond on that one?
I do. I think it's one of the biggest
I think
mistakes that they can make.
I think it's fine to have certain series like Dark Souls, right? Certain franchises that are known to be difficult. I think there's room for those out there. But I think as soon as you start making games to be difficult just for difficulty's sake, and it's not baked into what the franchise is, or like there's no reason for them to take Monster Hunter, right, and make it a super difficult game. There's just no reason. One, you're going to cut off people who are going to come play. Two, the game's never been super difficult anyway. I remember back in the day, some of the older, like old games were, like PS2 days, like some of those could be pretty tough. But Worlds wasn't that hard. LTA, what's up, bud? The only thing this game needs at some point is gym my wife. I know, I know, right, LTA? How you doing, LTA? Artificial difficulty, Dark Souls based. Yeah. Yep.
Is that if you make
Desync,
a game
you too.
really hard,
How
you're
are
just
y'all?
gonna make the accessibility for players low, because like, and I think Elden Ring is the best example for this. Elden Ring is, in my opinion, a very easy game if you play it in the right way, and it can be a very hard.
Past this.
Rise also felt slight at launch, but got 6 new monsters just 1 month later, and then 3 more a month after that. Wilds already feels like it needs endgame threats like its formidable Elder Dragons to really push its limits. And if it instead only gets 1 returning monster in the first 3 or so months after launch, this could be a long wait until its inevitable expansion.
And I think that I'm going to give this guy a little bit of credit. Past performance is an indicator of future performance, and Dragon's Dogma 2 had this exact same problem. And so like I think this could be fair, but I just don't think that like I like difficulty for me.
I don't really
like,
understand
looking
what
at difficulty
he's-
as being a factor. Elden Ring, I think, like you know, you can't beat this unless you get to a certain number. Sure, like what the difficulty caps and the difficulty levels for the game are.
I just want to see what he gives.
Like, in
What he
Dragon's
gives it.
Dogma 2, I felt like I had this insanely good character, and there was not.
Host of accessibility features. You can adjust the size of or turn off individual elements on your UI. You
Yeah.
have more control than ever over the all-important fashion side of things towards the end.
I could not
Partying
care
up
less.
online has also been made more robust, letting you run around each map with your
Yeah.
friends and seamlessly flow from hunt to hunt without having to regroup at camp between each mission.
Yeah, if you do
And even
the
if you're
if
largely
you export,
planning
just
to
do the
play
like
solo, there are quality of life
world
changes here for you,
exploration
too.
mode. Yeah.
That could be the surprisingly competent AI support hunters that fill empty spots in your party when you fire an SOS flare, but also the inclusion of an online single-player option that lets you fire flares to get help, but still pause the action entirely before you do.
That's great. Yeah,
I see what he
that's
gives
awesome.
it.
Monster Hunter Wilds continues to smooth off the rougher corners of the series in smart ways, reducing as much friction as possible that could get in the way of you grabbing any of its exceptionally fun weapons and planting them firmly in a monster's hide. But in that quest to make Monster Hunter more approachable, Wilds is sliced a little too close to the bone in some places, trimming its challenge back so much that I barely needed to engage with its in-depth equipment system at all this time to become an apex predator. Its more flexible combat is still some of the most fun I've had with the series, but like the blustering...
I hope that they add in a DLC for this game that's like Shadow of the Erdtree, and I want to see this fucker review it. After talking about how the game's so easy. Yeah, I want to see that happen. They always do, yeah.
That's really his only complaint is that the
lightning
game's
storms of its
too easy.
gorgeous desert. It burns brightly.
He has not said
briefly
really
until
anything
finally
else
reaches
negative
some
about the
real
game.
endgame
Sandworm.
beasts to challenge us.
Gave the game
8's fair. I mean, that's fair.
For more, check out our reviews of
I'm gonna be honest. That's what I've got the game at, is an 8 currently. Just not because of the difficulty or anything, but just because of the campaign. I don't mind that it was shorter, but like I wasn't really interested in any of the characters. Nothing just grabbed me about the campaign, you know. And then also, which I know this is like a thing for Monster Hunter, but the fucking UI, man. The UI. Holy crap. But I got it, like, if I don't do like points, I don't do like 8.5 or 8.2. I don't do, but if I was to do that, I would give it an 8.5. It's like right in between an 8 and a 9 for me right now. Now I haven't done everything, to be fair, but I've beat the main campaign, got a fair amount of hours into it, and that's kind of where I'm sitting with it right now.
Avowed or Like a Dragon, Pirate Yakuza in Hawaii. And for everything else, stick with IGN.
What did Avowed get?